How's it going, everyone? It is I, Anime Outlet, and this is What If Deku Could Create His Own Quirk. And now, before we begin, I would just like to tell you all that I'm going to be responding to pretty much every single comment down the comment section below. So if you have any questions or what if suggestions for me, please put them down the comment section below so I can see them and just tell you my thoughts on them. So now, let's begin. We see a 4-year-old Izuku run down the stairs of his house, running over to the living room of just his house, where we end up seeing both of his parents relaxing at the table, drinking each of their morning cups of coffee. As Izuku would stand there looking at them, all of a sudden he would start jumping up and down, just looked like he was completely shaking in excitement. "Mom, Dad," you would say with an excited look on his face. "When can we go to the Quirk doctor's office?" Izuku would say to them, as both of them would smile towards each other before looking back towards Izuku. "Calm down, Izuku. The Quirk doctor's office opens in just around an hour. Let's wait a little bit. Why don't you have some breakfast that's over there on the table for you, and then we'll leave, okay?" Izuku would quickly nod his head before rushing over to the table, opening up his chair, or just pushing or pulling it so Izuku could hop to it, and he would end up digging in, eating so fast which would worry his mother, which would cause her to say, "Izuku, please, just slow down, okay?" She would say with a smile on her face, just sort of laughing at Izuku's manner. As Izuku would say, "Oh, okay," would say in an innocent voice before going back to eating, now this time a lot slower. So with that, we now end up seeing Izuku finish his breakfast before they would get into a car and head off to the Quirk doctor's office. As we now end up seeing Izuku sitting in the lobby as both of his parents would be talking to the receptionist. "Okay, we'll have the doctor out as soon as he can to take a look at Izuku." "Alright," she would say before both of the parents would go down, sitting on either side of Izuku. As this would be happening, the doctor would end up strolling out of the office after just about a couple of minutes, as the day was going very slowly. He would stroll out of the office before looking around for any of the patients. Talking to the receptionist, he would end up looking over towards Izuku and his parents before motioning for them to follow. "Ah, good morning, Izuku, Miss Midoriya and Mr. Midoriya. Please follow me," he would say, directing the three into a private room, where the doctor would take a couple of x-rays, some tests, just to see what there could be within Izuku. "Alright, I've deduced that young Izuku here does have a quirk. If I were to guess, it'd be a mix between your quirk and your quirk," he would say, motioning towards both Mr. Midoriya and Mrs. Midoriya. So in motion towards both of them, they would both nod, or they would reach down their hand, grabbing onto Izuku, pulling him up out of their chair, before walking over towards the car, going out of the doctor's office, getting into the parking lot, going into their car, and driving home. As Izuku would be sitting on the floor of the living room, watching just All Might cartoons and just All Might commercials for new action figures and all this and that, Izuku would be probably just jumping up in the air, saying how he wished to be like All Might so much, as All Might was just so cool. Izuku would end up also seeing another person right to the side of All Might, which happened to be the number 15 hero, Dragon's Blaze, which, unbeknownst to Izuku, happened to be his father, who had a fire-breathing quirk. As Izuku would be staring at them, he would wave his Dragon Blaze and All Might action figure in the air, just saying how they were so cool, and he couldn't wait to be just like the both of them, as his mother would end up just staring at Izuku with a smile on her face as the next day would end up arriving. As we now end up seeing Izuku walking to school before going to school, sitting down around with everyone else, as some people would just turn to Izuku. "Hey, Izuku, I heard you turned 4 yesterday." "Yeah, I did. Why?" What's your quirk? Some of them would turn after hearing the quirk conversation, with excited eyes gleefully awaiting Izuku's response. Izuku would shake his head before just smiling. I don't know yet. I just know I'm gonna have the coolest quirk ever, Izuku would say with an excited tone in his voice. Meanwhile, a young Bakugo Katsuki would walk into the room before laughing at this expression. Oh, please. We all know I already have the coolest quirk, he would say with little pops flying out of his hands, as these were just mini sparks popping and crackling within his hands, as Bakugo had some sort of explosion nitroglycerin quirk thing. It was very strange to Izuku. However, it didn't really matter too much. Izuku still really couldn't believe he was going to have a quirk very similar to his father's and his mother's. So, as Izuku would be smiling, he would end up just hearing the bell signifying the end of the school day as Izuku would be walking home. However, as Izuku would stare up at the sky, something just seemed off. The clouds weren't really sunny like they were a minute ago. It was all cloudy and dark. Izuku could just tell something just didn't seem right at all. He would hurry home before opening up the door to his house, as it was eerily quiet. Too quiet. Izuku would softly shut the door before walking into his house, where he would end up hearing sniffling and just the sounds of crying coming from his parents' bedroom. Izuku would slowly walk up the steps, making sure not to make a sound. Walking up the steps, he would peer into his parents' bedroom, where he would end up seeing Inko holding the phone up to her ear, with a tissue wadded up in her hand, just wiping the tears off of her face. Izuku would look at her, wondering what was happening, before she would end up just looking his way. However, he was gone, walking to his room, deciding he didn't like looking at his mother in such a mood. So Izuku would walk back the other way, just kind of confused, wondering what was so wrong with his mother. So we now end up seeing Izuku just in his room doing his homework before going to bed, as he would end up waking up only to see his mother downstairs, who would try to pull off a smile but still couldn't. His father was strangely absent, and Izuku didn't know why. Izuku would go over towards the TV, flicking on just TV so he could eat his pancakes while watching the just morning cartoons. However, something was interrupting them, just news. And this news would be on the hero Dragon Blaze's death. The 15th hero had died in an altercation against a mysterious villain by the name of All For One, someone who the heroes didn't have much information on. He was very mysterious to them as well. So, if Atsuzuku would be saddened to hear that Dragon's Blaze was no longer just alive, was his favorite hero, Izuku was quite sad by this. However, Inko would end up walking up to Izuku, putting her hand on his shoulder. Izuku, I have some news for you, she would say with a cold tone in her voice. Izuku would look up to see her stony gray eyes. It looked like she had lost all emotion in them. She would look at Izuku before speaking to him. Your father, he's dead. Izuku's eyes would widen, as his entire world seemed to just be crumbling around him. His favorite hero dead, and now his father dead too? It was a word the 4-year-old Izuku didn't understand much about, but he did know that if they were dead, they weren't coming back. Izuku would stare at her before hugging her leg. However, all of a sudden, smoke would end up just be fuming out of Izuku's mouth, as fire would end up coming out of his mouth as well, for Izuku would end up burping out just a fire bubble that would soon end up dissipating. Inko would quickly pull apart Izuku before grabbing onto his shoulders with just an excited look in her face. Izuku, did you just awaken your quirk? she would say, fighting back tears, excited to see the Quirk she had fallen in love with all over again, now in the form of her own child. She would stare on towards Izuku with an excited face as he would end up doing it again, as he would end up jumping up into the air. Yeah, I unlocked my Quirk! Izuku would hey, as all of a sudden he would have an urge to go grab his All Might figure and just run around playing with it, as he couldn't wait to become a hero. However, he would end up looking at it oddly before reaching out his hand, as the All Might figure would come flying towards Izuku, as Izuku would end up catching it. Whoa, this is awesome! Izuku would say, as his mother would only stare towards him, hugging him even deeper. The doctor was right. Izuku had the fire breath Quirk and a stronger telekinesis Quirk, just like his parents. However, the doctor kind of was right. Izuku didn't have just both of these Quirks. He had multiple, as, well, it was really just one Quirk with a bunch packed into one. As Izuku, who just dealing with the loss of his father, would end up just creating his own Quirk, as this Quirk would end up being a combination of all of his favorite people put into one. A fire-breathing Quirk because of his father, a telekinesis Quirk because of his mother, and a strength Quirk because of All Might. And even a water Quirk to balance out his water-breathing Quirk, or not his water-breathing, his fire, just breathing Quirk, to balance that out. So Izuku could balance it out with water, and because he had recently seen some water heroes on the news and thought they were cool. So, after this day, Izuku's life, although having all these cool quirks that he had created, really wasn't that good. His life had continued to go down in a downward spiral, as without the main moneymaker being his father, and Inko not having a job, being a stay-at-home mother, they would end up losing the house Izuku had grown up in from an early age, instead having to move into a very cheap apartment in just a bad side of town, causing Izuku to have to walk home witnessing some things that just a very young child shouldn't have to witness. And Izuku would grow up having to deal with stuff like that, and by the time Izuku was 10, he would know how bad his life was. But despite this, he didn't complain, only using that as motivation, telling his mother he would get them out of this place. He would get them out of this bad neighborhood. He would save them just from just all the hardship they were dealing with by becoming a hero. And Inko never told him off about it, not because just her husband died in the line of duty, rather because she wanted Izuku to be whatever he wanted to be. Although it was going to be hard and stressful for her, she wanted Izuku to have the best life he possibly could. So Izuku would end up signing up for the UA entrance exam, as we now end up seeing Izuku walk into the UA campus, where we see Izuku walk into the auditorium, take the written exam, before going in to the hero exam hallway, where Izuku would be standing there waiting for the doors to open, as all of the students they would. Izuku would rush in using his strength quirk right into his legs, allowing for him to run in with such tremendous speed, using his eyes just running in insanely quickly. As Izuku would do this, he would end up finding a horde of robots, or he would end up just using his fire breathing out a massive cloud of flames, completely decimating the one-pointers, all lying within his path. As Izuku would continue going, breaking up some of the road with his fists, having rocks throwing them at the robots with his telekinesis quirk. As all of a sudden, Izuku would end up here rumbling and shaking from all around him. As Izuku would hear the rattling, rumbling, and shaking, feeling that as well, he would end up looking around, seeing a massive zero-pointer towering over him, where he would end up hearing just a voice yell, "Help!" Izuku's eyes would lock in towards it, sprinting off, putting his hand out, stopping the zero pointer with his telekinesis. And that is where What If Deku Could Create His Own Quirk Part 1 comes to an end. I hope you all did enjoy this part, and if you did, please consider subscribing, as it really does help this channel out, and you can even be notified when the other parts of this series do end up coming out. I thank you all for watching once again, and goodbye.